Also, just like assume hardware requirements for full nodes continues to drop over time. Or also you can assume that like the hardware inside phones is just going to get better and better. And then you essentially have this distribution channel of, you already have all these hardware devices out there that are supportive of like a certain network. So you could, be running full nodes at some point on Solana phones. I don't know what iteration that will come in, but I think that's also probably the end game for this inevitably.
This episode is sponsored by Sei, the parallel execution EVM-compatible Layer 1 with sub-second finality. Incentives for users are coming to Sei this month from teams like DragonSwap. Start farming on Sei today by visiting dragonswap.app. We'll hear more from Sei later in the show. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Lightspeed. We're here with a little bit of a switch up today. We're doing a roundup with Ian Unsworth, the co-founder of Kairos Research. And we're doing this because Mert and Dan, the usual suspects, it seems like everyone is in Singapore and Ian and I are the only two crypto people left in America holding down the fort. So we brought Ian on, who is a data guy, someone I really respect and talk to often as a source, to chat over the big stories of the week. Ian, thank you so much for coming on Lightspeed.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm glad that, we are still in the US, but we are certainly sidelined, not having fun in Singapore.
No, exactly. I typically don't get like FOMO about crypto events because they're often not that fun, but it truly does seem like every single person I talk to, and my day job is in Singapore right now, so it would have been neat to chat with them, but maybe next year. As we're alluding to, it is breakpoint day 1 today, or I guess day 0, but in a few hours it'll be day 1. We already have seen a few announcements come trickling in. I guess 2 to start with are Drift and Helius, both raised rounds over 20 million, which I brought up in today's Lightspeed newsletter. And, fundraise announcements are only so interesting. It kind of matters more what you do with the funds that you raise. But I do think that the numbers are intriguing there because by my count, there hasn't been a $20 million round for a Solana native company since Ellipsis Labs, which builds Phoenix and is now developing Atlas. And then about a month before that, you saw Eclipse raise like 50 million. But both of these protocols are building blockchains now, whereas Helius and Drift are not building blockchains. And as we know, VCs tend to kind of value companies higher that build their own chains just because of the potential value capture of that endeavor. So it might be like signaling a little bit of a reset or a new kind of level being set in the Solana venture market, where you can be a perps dex like Drift and raise 25 million, whereas maybe a year ago that wasn't possible. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but that's just an early guess and observation I pointed out. But the bigger one that I want to get into today is at Token 2049, actually. The Solana Mobile team just announced the second Solana phone, which is called the Solana Seeker. It's very, very hyped, much anticipated announcement. We finally got some of the details of what the new phone is going to look like. So, Ian, when you looked at the Seeker and just what we know so far, what was kind of your initial takeaway or thoughts on the phone?
Yeah, I mean, it looks really cool, and I'm glad that they're continuing to take the hardware approach. It's a big experiment, but I'm glad that the folks at Solana are doing it because they're really kind of combining stuff on the hardware side along with the software. I personally thought it was really exciting. I went ahead and I pre-ordered mine. I am skeptical of when it'll actually get here, but I'm really excited to play around with it. By some of my own estimates, I just kind of tracked where my funds went when I paid for it. Was able to use USDC, which was really cool, and the back end was done by Shopify. So very surreal experience to purchase a crypto phone with 2 recognizable brand names. So that was really interesting. But I think it's really exciting of the potential things that you can do because one of the things Solana has really been focused on the last couple months is deepen. And I think this can really unlock some new potential, avenues there, because you're going to have uniform hardware across all these devices. So far, it looks like they've sold around they've gotten around 1,100 phones in pre-deposits just by using my own numbers. I just took the wallet
They're saying
amount.
140,000 pre-orders.
Yeah, so I mean, I could totally be wrong on that number. I just looked at where my funds went and I took that wallet amount and just divided it by the actual price from the how much was in the wallet before they did the announcement and how much is in it now. So I can totally be wrong on that.
I dug around. I think it's hard to find an exact number because people can pay on chain and they also, I guess, can pay with credit card and stuff. But they're saying over 140,000 orders before they announced the chapter 2, which you think would drive more purchases. And at $450 each, that's 63 million in revenue, which is a lot of money. A lot of money. I don't know how much they're paying to develop the phone, but I thought that was an interesting aside.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's relatively price competitive with the iPhone. I definitely think there's a different audience that's getting these things. I think there's a lot of incentives too as well, given that the last one, had all these kind of airdrops and these specific things to it. So that'll be really interesting to see. I don't know if they announce what kind of chip is on the inside, but 8 gigabytes of RAM, that's more than the iPhone 15 at least. And 128 gigabyte storage is kind of standard for the iPhone. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see.
So are you buying it with the expectation of airdrops, or because you're going to use it as your everyday phone? Because this is kind of my whole thing with this.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm buying it with the anticipation of, or just the excitement of being able to have a hardware device, crypto hardware device that's specific to the fastest growing network right now. The airdrops and all that, I think it's good to always have low expectations, because then if something happens, you can just be very happy about it. So I wouldn't get too tied up on that. And like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting, experiments that can happen now, because if there are 140,000 of these, assume that, assume that's not being botted, and it's actually 140,000 individuals. Assume it's even half that. That's a pretty distributed network. You could run certain programs on these phones if the chip is actually pretty robust. So I think there's some interesting things that could arise in that sense. And then it's a great distribution channel for Solana gaming if you're trying to have a mobile game take off or anything like that. You've already kind of got the distribution there, and it's also interesting because it's kind of the only phone that people would buy for the kind of exogenous incentives that might come with the phone itself, rather than just I'm buying an iPhone because I've had an iPhone for 5-6 years, and there's a kind of a social aspect to that as well. But yeah, I'm buying with the just I want to check it out. I want to have fun with it and see what it's all about, and I hope it's a great success.
I'm I think it needs to be said that the interest in airdrops is probably driving a lot of the pre-orders for this phone, just because if you look at the way the last phone's market cycle played out, they sold a few thousand sagas, I believe. They slashed the price after 4 months. Sort of the media narrative out there was the saga wasn't a success. They didn't sell as much as they wanted to. And then Bonk becomes a lot more valuable, which was airdropped with these phones. And all of a sudden in December, months after they released the phone, the saga sells out in the US and people are reselling these for thousands of dollars on eBay. And it became kind of a big thing, mostly because of token airdrops and the speculation that came along with that. I spoke, I emailed with Emmett, who's the GM of Solana Mobile, and kind of asked him about this. And he said, look, yes, we expect that some of the purchases are going to be driven by speculation on airdrops, but you can make the argument that that's a good thing for people who are carrying out airdrops, because you have a very curated group of Solana OGs is kind of the term he used, as opposed to, if you're doing an airdrop a different way, I guess you're running into Sybil attacks and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
it's a fair enough point. I think that, like, however you feel about the airdrops, maybe one positive outcome of this is that it's really hard to run like a phone startup at this point. The incumbents that are out there are just so far ahead in the technology, and they have so much more money than you that, like, it's going to be hard to just on your own merits build a phone from scratch and challenge Apple and Android. But um, they're basically kind of using the airdrop interest to bootstrap this phone. Like I said, 63 million in revenue, and that number is probably going to go up after the marketing cycle that's going to happen during Breakpoint. So, like, say they break 100 million in revenue on a phone. That probably wouldn't happen without the airdrops, but then you can, hire more engineers and build a better next iteration of the phone. And this is sort of how you get that ball rolling. So I do think that even if for now it's kind of like there's a lot of airdrop interest driving purchases, and like I also do want to get into some of the things you can do with the phone. I don't mean to be so cynical, but even if it's just mostly airdrop interest, there's actually like reasons you would do this that develop your business down the line. And in 3 to 5 years, maybe there's a much more robust mobile app network for Solana and Web3, and you have an even more state-of-the-art phone because you've kind of gone through a few iterations of it. So that was my initial kind of take on it. I'll be interested to see some of the apps that get announced. It's pretty light on details right now. The phone is shipping at some point in 2025 is all we know. So, there's time left to go. I guess, Ian, like, I don't know how much you look into mobile in your job, but I'm just curious what kinds of apps outside of, I don't know, meme coin platforms you're most interested in for a like Solana native phone that has this Solana wallet built in and some of the kind of Web3 capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that also kind of does tie into like the airdrop stuff, because like we can just take a step back and look at what the airdrop actually is, and it's just actually an incentive to do something. And then you take another step back, and that's kind of the whole point of DeFi is like you wouldn't get people just like randomly doing these things if there wasn't actually an incentive to do it, but the collective of those actions can be really powerful. So like let's say that you can use this as like a dash cam for a Hive mapper or anything like that, because right now you have to get like specific hardware that they sell, put it up in your car, drive around, get all the map details. So like, I mean, there's essentially, there's infinite possibilities. There's no shortage of creativity in the human mind. So I think there's probably already some people that are building interesting like DeFi networks out there that see this announcement and, think it's like really, really exciting. Obviously you also have like, Helium with what they're doing with like mobile networks and, kind of like mesh hotspots and like mesh connectivity. So I couldn't tell you right now because it doesn't exist yet. And I don't spend too much time thinking about like the DeFi network as a whole, especially from like the builder side. But I think this kind of taps into, a whole nother sector of people outside of the meme coin trading folks, which, are a necessary part of the ecosystem. Like they're having fun, they're speculating. Maybe they're doing some even more sophisticated stuff on the back end. In some cases, but yeah, for the most part, I'm really excited just going to see what actually does arise from this that we haven't seen yet. So yeah, TBD, but I'm excited.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some connection with Blinks even. We had Chris from Dialect on the pod a few episodes ago, and there's a lot of potential around Blinks that are mobile. And sort of what's been holding back some of the distributions on Blink so far, I think, has been the fact that most people do most internet things on mobile at this point. And I think it's smart for the Solana Labs team to build in this direction and say, look, we need to like go mobile first. And it's even just taking a step back, assuming this phone gets made and shipped, it is kind of incredible that there's now 2 Solana phones. Like, it's hard to imagine another blockchain ecosystem creating and shipping two phones. I feel like you live a little bit in this world sometimes of endless announcements, but it just takes so long for these things to get to market. So I give them for their flowers for just, making the phone, getting it out to market. I think DPIN's an interesting one. The like phone location data. I don't know. Helium does something like this already with they basically pay you in Helium tokens to share your location data and strengthen their Wi-Fi hotspots or their wireless hotspots to like, I'm walking down the street and they can see how strong the connection is, and then they know if they should incentivize people to deploy there. So there's already versions of this, and I feel like it can only get more sophisticated as time goes by. And I really like, I've spoken about this on the pod, but I feel like DPIN is going to be one of these things that's going to break out in a more real way. I just think there's a lot of interest there, and a lot of pretty sophisticated folks coming into the DPIN space. It's just a thing that's been underexplored outside of a project like Helium. So I don't know, but it is, crypto people do complain a lot, it seems like, about the lack of usable apps outside of stuff that you can, speculate on token prices. So this sort of Solana Mobile has this SDK for mobile developers. And I do think that the lack of apps is running into reality here. And hopefully this kind of kickstarts interest in actually developing apps, because you have, 140,000 of these phones out there, plus, maybe they get to 200,000. I don't know what the number will be, but maybe that actually like leads to real usable apps being developed.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be fantastic, because that is what's everyone's like just kind of generally mad about, is like there's no apps. It's like, okay, well, we're not necessarily a mobile centric ecosystem as a whole. So if Solana can become a leader in that category before everyone else, that's a pretty big advantage. And also just like assume hardware requirements for full nodes continues to drop over time. And it's just, or also you can assume that like the hardware inside phones is just going to get better and better. And then you essentially have this distribution channel of, you already have all these hardware devices out there that are supportive of like a certain network. So you could, be running full nodes at some point on Solana phones. I don't know what iteration that will come in, but I think that's also probably, the end game for this inevitably. Because if people don't want to use this as their full-time phone, and they just want to have it like, doing something in the background productive, I mean, that's a great potential use case. So, I mean, that's definitely something we shouldn't overlook.
So functionally, that just looks like you're kind of using the dormant compute power from the phone to like help validate the Solana network.
Yeah, because what's one of the biggest issues the Ethereum folks and kind of everyone else in crypto, for the most part, outside of Solana, has with Solana is just like, the hardware requirements for validators are, very high. The entire initial stake that you need to get one going is like relatively high, especially now at like current prices. So I mean, if you could just opt in and just like run a full node, or even like a light node in that sense, and earn some sort of incentive for doing that, without having to have like any upfront capital cost outside of just owning the phone itself, you solve the decentralization challenge very quickly. And then the Ethereum folks with the Raspberry Pis are like, just kind of sitting there like, you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something we definitely shouldn't overlook, I think.
That's a really interesting point. But we're quite a bit away from that version of reality, right? Like it currently takes quite a bit of computing power to run a full node, to my understanding.
Yeah, and even like with the overclock guys are doing with Mithril, it does kind of lower the requirements for running like a full node, but it's still given the what's going to be in this phone, at least what they're advertising right now, it doesn't look like that would be feasible. But yeah, for like fifth or sixth, even fourth iteration of this phone, who knows? Maybe it's something we should be anticipating.
Yeah. I'm curious as well. Does Solana choose a new name every phone, or are we going to get like the Seeker? Like, did Solana Mobile name it the Solana Saga, and they're like, I don't like this name. Never mind. I'm going with the Solana Seeker, or is it going to be a new name every time? It's an interesting branding question that I've been thinking about today. I don't know if we'll know the answer, but one other jumping off point I wanted to get into as well is gaming. I've been thinking about gaming a bit recently, Ian, because I used to cover funding at Blockworks, and one thing I noticed is that there was always a steady stream of venture capital moving into gaming companies. Like, one of the things that just rain or shine VCs seem to really like is the implications for crypto and gaming. And intuitively, it makes sense, right? Like, there already are these kind of markets for in-game items on something like CS:GO, where people will trade skins, but it's not on like a verifiable ownership basis with a marketplace and stuff like that. Um, However, the venture dollars that have poured into crypto gaming have so far not led to many playable games. You had Axie Infinity and like Steppen were big viral games, but outside of that, you haven't seen a lot of games really take off in a mainstream way. Other than, I guess, today it would be like the Telegram mini apps, which I don't know, are sort of a little more speculation based than played for how fun they are. And the working theory that I've been putting out there is that a lot of this VC interest in crypto gaming started in 2020, 2021 market cycle when everyone was stuck inside much more during COVID, and people were just playing more video games than they ordinarily would. And so we overshot the demand for video games.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're sort of seeing some of these games that have been in development trying to come to market, and there's just maybe not as much demand there as you would think, or not as much interest as we thought a couple of years ago. I guess if you're going to build a bull case for crypto games, does it depend on something like the Solana Seeker or mobile for all the interest in crypto gaming to actually take off?
I don't think it's completely dependent on it, but I think it's absolutely helpful. For example, like I think the majority of gaming right now, in just terms of raw numbers, takes place on mobile devices. Around like so there's around like 6.4-ish billion mobile devices out there. Surveys of these people have said that like, you know, roughly like 50 to 60% of people have played a mobile game, and like estimates of like around like 1.4 billion daily active mobile gamers. And it's just like random stuff. And I think people just play these games because there's zero friction points and they just want to kill time. Like I think we all have like some relative who's like addicted to Candy Crush in some way for like whatever reason, you know. And you know, you're just kind of sliding stuff around there. There's no friction. So I think like the big thing for gaming that we might have gotten wrong as an industry is like we kind of first focused on this idea of like this mass composable ecosystem where this game is connected to that game, and I can sell my skins to this person. I can use the same skins in this game, and that's just like kind of unrealistic, I think, with like how these companies operate. I don't think they necessarily want to tap into each other's ecosystems necessarily. So I would be really happy with just a simple crypto game if you know, I could just be playing some random game and just simply be able to sell my in-game coins for US dollars. I think like you're kind of a sector leader immediately. And like if the game's fun, even better. Like, you know, I think no one was really playing Axie Infinity because they liked the game, and that was kind of the joke the whole time. It was just a, you know, airdrop farming with a few more clicks. And then if you can get this on the, you know, mobile devices of these like, you know, Solana phones, I think that's when it can get pretty interesting. As to what games we're going to see, yeah, I'm not too close to that sector specifically either. I did see the same like kind of trends with like, you know, VC funding, and it makes sense just because there's tons of money that's spent on these games. Like Grand Theft Auto 5, I believe, has made 8.6 billion in revenue since it came out.
Really?
Which is like, pretty insane. I think that kind of tops any movie ever made.
What do people? I don't really play video games much, but are there in-game purchases with GTA, or is that just 8 billion of people buying GTA?
So it's mainly driven by in-game purchases. Like, I haven't played it in probably like 2-ish years, but I remember the last time I logged on, there's like a full casino now there, and like people are like in the casino, and there's like, it's really dystopian. But people like it clearly, and they're voting with their money.
Yeah.
So I mean, you shouldn't underestimate how much can be like drawn through these games, and I'm sure there's like even similar figures for like a game like Fortnite, or CS:GO, whatever you want to name. But I think it's also really important to have like the network effect for these games too. But yeah.
That's the thing, is I think game developers want to build the next GTA 5 because that game is awesome and it's like so in depth and yeah, just a masterpiece of the kind of like creative act of making games. But as far as actual ROI, I think a safer bet is building one of these silly little kind of, play it on your commute on the bus type games. Like tons and tons of people play those. And if there's like small financial incentives and the game sort of is addicting in the way that like a Flappy Bird is addicting, which did you see Flappy Bird's making a comeback, by the way? And it's sort of crypto related.
I did not. I'd love to hear more on that though. What's going on?
Somebody, this is a side note, but someone got the US courts to renounce the patent on Flappy Bird, I believe. And they are now, since there's no copyright, I guess it's copyright, not patent. There's no copyright on Flappy Bird. They're bringing it back to market, and it has like a crypto angle. And there's web pages that you can search up that are now taken down. But if you type like Solana on their website through Google, it'll show you like take Solana to the next level with Flappy Bird. So that Solana Seeker, if you guys are watching this, Flappy Bird, Solana Seeker exclusive could do numbers for the phone. But no, I think that the mini games like mobile apps present a lot more promise for actual gaming taking off. And one of the real friction points is mobile wallets. And the Seeker has this new kind of integrated wallet that has like a seed phrase that's stored securely within the phone. So there is potential there, I think.
I think so as well. Like to your point, if you can get rid of that friction point, you're already in a winning position.
The Sei network brought parallel execution to the EVM with their V2 update this past spring. Sub-second finality and massive throughput are now available to EVM developers everywhere on Sei's high-performance Layer 1. Incentives for users are coming to Sei this month from teams like DragonSwap. Start farming on Sei today by visiting dragonswap.app. That's dragonswap.app. Thanks again to Sei for sponsoring today's episode. I want to move on to some of the other things going on in crypto and Solana this week. One interesting one that I saw that we'll touch on briefly, Cypherpunk Holdings is a Canadian holding company and publicly traded on the Canadian stock market. It just rebranded to Sol Strategies, and it's exclusively focused on investing in the Solana ecosystem. This kind of rebrand happened after Leah Wald took over as CEO, who was the head of Valkyrie previously, which is another crypto investment outlet. My sort of take on this is that first of all, it's very interesting. I don't think there's a lot of analogies for this in like the crypto world. You obviously have a lot of institutional investors, but it's rare to see one, maybe outside of Bitcoin, that's like, this is our ecosystem and we're exclusively investing here. But I looked at it like a souped up ETF, basically, because a Solana ETF would give you exposure to the price of Solana and maybe some of the staking rewards. So this is giving you that. They're saying they're investing in a lot in Sol, and they're staking that and then passing along the rewards. And then they're also investing in the ecosystem. So it's like if you could invest in a Solana ETF that also gave you exposure to like Jupiter, and then it's all compliant and regulated and all the things people like about these ETFs. But I don't know. Do you have a take on the Sol Strategies rebrand? I don't know how deeply you've looked into it, but
I certainly think it's interesting, and I think if we had to draw an analogy, the closest thing is MicroStrategy and with Michael Saylor.
Yeah.
I think the main difference is it doesn't appear that she's urging people to mortgage their house to buy more Sol, and she's not issuing convertible debt notes to buy more Sol. So I think it's a really interesting idea. And to your point of like, kind of just being the primary liquid venue prior to any ETFs that come online, which I have to imagine will probably come online within the next like 2-3 years in the US at least. It's a good strategy, and you do get that kind of additional ecosystem exposure. So if you're looking for Solana beta, then it's like just kind of baked in with that as well. So I think overall it's a interesting strategy for sure. What were they focused on prior to this? Just general crypto plays. I didn't really dig into their past much.
Yeah, so they were big into Bitcoin and ETH, and they started acquiring Solana in like April or so.
Okay.
Leah takes over beginning of July, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
They start disclosing Sol investments, and then the board approves the rebrand like July 31st. And then the news broke last week or something like that. It also got me thinking, one thing you saw with the ETH ETFs is that just offering like institutional regulated crypto products isn't a slam dunk. Like the Bitcoin ETFs did quite well in terms of flows, and ETH ETFs, I think you might even have more insight into this than I do, but they didn't do super well. Like not everybody is hitting a home run with their ETH ETF product right now. And so if you're the new CEO for Cypherpunk Holdings, which it's a publicly traded company, it's not a big one, it's not like BlackRock or Fidelity sized. If you have to compete with all of these much bigger wider client base firms, why not just go niche and try to find like your specific demographic that you can really hit with? And I sort of, that's my guess of why Cypherpunk decides to rebrand to Sol Strategies. And I wonder if you get like a Ton Strategies, firm that comes up, and it's like, you want regulated institutional access to Ton, like we're your firm for it, because you can't just run the BlackRock playbook and do all sorts of different ETFs and actually like get people to invest in them.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point. Because like for the Bitcoin ETF, it's like Bitcoin is Bitcoin. It's not really going to change. That's kind of like also like the value prop. So maybe that's why the narrative is easier to explain. And it's also just like kind of the poster child of crypto in general. And like just from BlackRock's inflows alone, they have around like 20 billion net inflows for their Bitcoin ETF, which launched in January, and then about like 1.3 billion, 1.03 billion maybe for their Ethereum ETF, which launched, say like it was early August, I believe. So like on a percentage basis, they're not looking great because like net inflows for the ETH ETF is like, I think negative 615 million. A lot of that is obviously just coming from Grayscale. But maybe for these crypto projects which aren't as deterministic in their roadmap, it does make sense for companies to kind of pursue this strategy more, where like a hands-on involvement can definitely make a difference. And I think that's also something you see like with Solana in general, is like there is this cohesive vision of like where we're going, and we have a marketing department, whereas like on the Ethereum side, the like Ethereum Foundation kind of feels like this weird shadow pseudo government of like just like making sure you don't grow too big, or like they're very like risk oriented around the design preferences, and I think that can definitely be not beneficial when we're this early on in the iteration of just blockchains in general. So I think it's an interesting strategy for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that one develops. We're gonna have Leah Wald on the pod. I hope. It's not confirmed yet. I guess I'm curious. Just in the I know Kairos does some flows reports for the ETH ETF. I subscribe to your Telegram channel, so I see those. Plug for Ian. Go subscribe to the Kairos Telegram. But what is the actual benefit to in ETH ETFs in general? I guess I don't really see the business case because Bitcoin ETFs, it's as you said, the narrative is easy enough to digest. The Winklevoss's dad is into Bitcoin. Did you see this story, by the way?
No, I didn't know their
He's
dad is into Bitcoin. That's
off
interesting.
topic, but yeah, he's I hate that I'm going this off topic, but the Winklevoss's dad is into Bitcoin, and he just donated 4 million. Sure, yeah, 4 million, I think, in Bitcoin to Grove City College, which is his alma mater, to establish the Winklevoss School of Business over there. It's the first Bitcoin donation of its kind. But
That's cool.
he's an old guy and he's into Bitcoin, because it's an asset that I think older people that might be interested in ETFs of this kind would be able to understand.
Yeah.
With the ETH ETFs, it's okay, if you're thinking about smart contract blockchains and the kind of applications of Ethereum, is it really that hard to just buy Ethereum through other means? I guess and even if you're an institution, you have things like Coinbase Institutional where you can buy ETH. And then to me, Solana is even further down that curve where it's if you're aware of what this thing is, wouldn't you just be able to buy it in a way that doesn't charge a management fee? So I'm just curious if you've thought about what's the actual value prop for non-Bitcoin ETFs?
Yeah, I think the main value prop is just the ease of access there. You can do it through your brokerage account. You're not having to worry about forgetting your password to your Coinbase account. If you're doing it on chain, you're not having to worry about all the things that come with self custody. As important as self custody is, I don't necessarily trust my mom and dad to self custody their ETH. So I think it's the ease of access is a huge thing. And I think the narrative is a bit too complex for investors to understand at this point because there are so many competing narratives. Because if you were to explain what's the value prop of Solana, there's a bunch of different avenues you can take, and it's the same thing for Ethereum. Whereas Bitcoin is just has this really interesting story with everyone kind of knows there's this anonymous founder, and I think to your point as well, some older folks that literally kind of maybe even lived through the transition off of the gold standard. Maybe they view maybe their trust is a little bit different in actual what value actually is. So I think the value prop of the Ethereum ETFs and anything that's down the risk curve that's going to come online as well is the ease of access to these products, which are they're tech adjacent, but they're not necessarily correlated with the same users of all the FANG companies. So I think it's a really interesting just kind of narrative that we haven't nailed down exactly how to explain this to boomers. I think a lot of people in general know crypto is interesting and they're maybe not too down the weeds on it. So the best place to get started is just owning a little bit, and then you have an incentive to go and learn more. I think that's how a lot of people in the industry kind of got to where they are now. It's just dipping your toes in the water and then learning how to swim later on. So that's kind of the value prop I think the ETFs offer of putting 50 basis points of your entire portfolio in an ETH ETF or Solana ETF when they're available, and then getting more comfortable as you understand the technology and adoption continues to come online. Because I do believe blockchains are going to represent a large percentage of the global financial system in some point. It's going to be on these rails. It's just superior in a lot of other ways. So I think it's just how do we explain the value prop of the networks themselves to people is kind of difficult.
And even if it doesn't happen in the short term, even if the financial world doesn't transition to blockchain rails, I still think there's a case for these ETFs where it just becomes standard practice that an asset manager, if you have like an aggressive investment strategy, an asset manager will put like 1 to 3% of your portfolio into digital assets. And if every index fund starts doing that, or everyone's like Vanguard portfolio just has 1 to 3% or something like that in Bitcoin, and then maybe you diversify into ETH and Solana if those ETFs are ever approved.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's not a hard case to make. Like even if some of the more bullish for crypto versions of the future don't come to pass, like even if regulation is still an uphill battle and all these things, I think you can see a world where there's just more and more allocation from these like really large investment portfolios into Bitcoin as kind of this hedge, or this, you want a little bit of exposure to something that could have a lot of upside. So I think they'll be relevant for a long time. But I have been curious as the Sol ETFs have played out, the ETH ETFs have played out, and Solana saw its proposals for ETFs. It's like cool, but are these actually beneficial? I don't know. Bitcoin proved its place. ETH has yet to, in my opinion. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. Okay. Another one I wanted to chat about just briefly is the Trump crypto stuff that's been going on recently. Did you see the video of him buying the burger? First of all,
I saw the video, and
I loved that video, man. It was so funny.
it's really funny, just like seeing like any kind of old person interact with I don't know, transacting in Bitcoin is pretty funny on multiple levels. There's like a lot to unpack there, let alone it being Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's just like it's so hilarious. It's someone holding a phone, and then one of his aides is holding the other phone, and they're trying to scan the QR code, and Trump is just standing there, not touching any part of this transaction. So I don't even know if you can make the claim that a former president like transacted with Bitcoin. He sort of stood nearby as other people did. And the payments UX was bad. Like tap to pay, it took 30 seconds, while tap to pay would take a second.
Yeah.
It was not a great look, but it was very funny, and I think, I don't know, something that's going to be burned into my memory.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was, the reactions were also funny because like if that would have been like with stable coins, like if he was using like, I don't know, Solana Pay or something with like USDC, obviously like the Bitcoin crowd would get upset, but it's like if it's Bitcoin, it's good for everyone, which is kind of funny. It's like kind of similar concept to like kosher food or halal food. It's like it has to be that for certain groups of people, but like regardless, everyone who's hungry will eat it no matter what. Like everyone who doesn't fall into those other groups, which is like I thought it was funny. Seeing like the Bitcoiners' reactions to it as well.
That's a funny point. Yeah, Bitcoin is the halal food of crypto. Like no one's gonna get mad if you're using Bitcoin to buy a burger. Although like why you would use Bitcoin for payments is unclear, as a lot of people pointed out as well in the aftermath.
Yeah.
There's also this like sort of the reaction to it was funny too, because you can tell it's like, oh shoot, it's taking longer than we expected to get this QR code to scan. Like maybe the data was slow or something. And then the Trump's aide is like, it went through, and like tries to really like bring the hype. It just is, it's perfect. It's such a good video.
It is. It's a great bit.
And then beyond this, we also got this bizarre kind of Twitter space about World Liberty Financial, which it doesn't seem like a lot of details are revealed about it, other than the fact that there will be a token. I find this extremely bizarre. Just so close to the election, why like Trump would be doing something like this. It seems like it's going to be kind of a lending protocol, which, that it be that as it may, like why right now? Why not wait till after the election? But I don't know. What's been your thought as the kind of World Liberty Financial Trump project has unfolded?
I haven't dug into it too deep on like the project itself, but I have like some general high level thoughts on like the importance of it. And like the simple case in my opinion is like, if you have like a former president launching a crypto project, uh, that's incredibly bullish. It's going to get a lot of people just like you're reading about it, listening about it, just trying to do some sort of like research on it, maybe even using it. Maybe it's going to be the onboarding experience for, potential new users. And that's fantastic. Um, as for the timing, I think it's definitely interesting because like, he's obviously very busy right now. He's got like an election next month. So yeah, timing is pretty funny. And it's also like kind of, maybe blowing over the whole debacle of like the DJT coin with like, Baron and Skrelly, and like that whole mess. Um, but yeah, I think it's incredibly interesting and it's definitely not bearish. I think like that's the one certainty.
Well, it's not bearish if it actually like plays out and becomes a legit platform. Like there is I mean, the guy associated with it was associated with Doe Finance, which I hadn't heard of until CoinDesk kind of reported on this, but and some other outlets picked it up. But apparently there was like a hack of that platform. So you would think that the Trumps would, be able to afford like good auditors and things like that to look at the project. But it's strange. I mean, so Nick Carter is, this very publicly kind of pro-Trump for the crypto industry person, and he was kind of tweeting like, "Can we get Trump to stop? Like this only ends badly." I think very likely nothing about World Liberty Financial actually happens before the election. Like I can guarantee you that Donald is not guaranteed, but it's very likely he's not going to sign off on them releasing this platform before November. But I don't know. I guess it is it is increasing the reach or people's knowledge. I saw an old friend the other day, and who knows I'm a crypto journalist, and he's like, the new Trump DeFi thing, and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I never thought I'd be talking with you about crypto news, but here we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot rests on, is it a legit project? Does it get hacked or something? Do they abandon it after like a token event? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Very curious timing right before the election, but I think it will end up being a non-story in the short term, is sort of my take.
A non-story would probably be a good story
Yeah, exactly.
for the sake of the industry right now. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So okay, with our kind of last couple of minutes here, Ian, I wanted to just check in on the restaking world, because that's kind of what you do a lot of over at Kairos. And whenever we chat, it's typically because I'm like, I need restaking takes. I got my guy to weigh in. So Solana restaking, you saw Jito announce that it's going to be launching a platform. Solaire went live with its Solana restaking platform. And then both of them are kind of competing for businesses to build with their restaking infrastructure. So you've seen a few Solana projects announce that they're building with Jito, a few announce they're building with Solaire. I think the inflows to Solaire at least have not been nearly as big as they were for Eigenlayer in the peak of its popularity, but maybe there's an argument it's still early. But I guess I'm just curious to get like a status update on Solana restaking from you. Like as you look at that sector, what do you think is going on right now?
I think it's super early on the Solana side. As far as like comparisons to Eigenlayer, I don't think it's entirely fair because like as like a general concept, restaking, people are still trying to figure out on Ethereum, kind of where it's blown up. We don't have any active like rewards going over there yet as of today. We don't have like any active slashing. Like Jito, when they launch, could potentially be the first restaking platform in all of crypto to have both of those things live at launch. And then it gets very real, and then people are able to assess the risk and the reward there. On the Solaire side, to be completely honest, I haven't dug into Solaire too deeply. I'm very deep on the Jito side. And So like just kind of, I guess, like general disclosure there. I don't have too much knowledge on Solana, but like the people I've talked with, like that are restaking in size on these platforms, they're generally kind of skeptical of the AVS that are being built on Solana. And that might extend to the entire Solana ecosystem to start with in general, because the purpose of restaking on Ethereum is to compensate for the lack of, I guess, like abilities essentially of what can happen on chain over on Ethereum. So now we have all these like, microservices that pop up and allow you to do off-chain compute or whatever, all like other things that should be able to essentially like hyperscale Ethereum, like lower rollup like costs with like cheaper DA through EigenDA, whereas like Solana doesn't really have these same constraints as of right now. So you actually might see a lot more consumer-oriented AVS or NCN, whatever you want to call them, pop up over on Solana through restaking. And also in general, the DeFi penetration rate on Solana is much lower than on Ethereum. So like there's still a huge market to be had there. And also just when you look at like how much stake there is on Ethereum versus Solana, like the stake ratio of Ethereum is about 28%, I think, right now, whereas on Solana it's around 66%. So that's like a friction point already for people to unstake and then like go back and restake or liquid stake or whatever it may be. So if they can like figure out how to kind of ease that process, if maybe you could convert immediately from staked tokens to liquid staked tokens, and then you can go interact in DeFi, maybe that's like a big barrier to break through. We saw something like that happen in Cosmos with the liquid staking module, which like Stride and like folks from like the Cosmos Hub put together, but ultimately there's not too many users over there. So it never really picked up in Steam, and there's a bit of complexity, but it's a great concept, like many things that happen in Cosmos, great ideas that don't really see their full fruition. Restaking as a concept, you can even argue, is one of those. They were like first to interchain security and all these things. But yeah, over on Solana, I think that it's going to be really interesting to see, exactly how these AVS develop. And I do think it's pretty strategic, though, of like Renzo to, kind of rip the Band-Aid off of, claiming alignment or anything from that, and just being like platform agnostic. And, they're going to be launching like they're calling them a vault receipt token or LRT, on Judo's restaking platform through Easy Soul. So I think that's super interesting to see a protocol that's popularized on Ethereum come over to Solana and try to tap into this growing DeFi space over here, because you can look at the lower DeFi penetration rate on Solana in general as a huge market opportunity. Like think about like 25 to 33% of Judo sold today is in DeFi. And when I say DeFi, I'm only looking at DEXs or lending markets, so where it's being used productively. So there's a lot more of this stuff that can come online. And then you've also got like Fragmetric, which is another VRT on Solana, which is essentially going to be able to take any LST and restake that. And they've essentially got like a mechanism where they're able to put that into another token and like have that just as an individual basket to make slashing conditions easier. It's a bit too maybe technical for right now, but that's another really interesting innovation. And so like you clearly see people that are looking over at Ethereum, at EigenLayer and Symbiotic and Mellow, and seeing what's really working over there from like the design choices, and being able to take that and run with it. So like we might actually be at the beginning of this trend where we're seeing, Solana take DeFi ideas from Ethereum and then execute them on their network better because it's cheaper, it's faster. There is less like overall stake right now, but like, those two things I assume will drive that higher over time. So it's like the pattern now is like ideas from Cosmos to Ethereum, to Solana is kind of like the chain of operations
The
I'm
idea
seeing now.
flow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's super interesting what's happening over there, but would love to take a deeper look on Solana and then report back.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back for that one. But there's some interesting points there. I guess the thing I always think about when there's a restaking story to be written is the forbidden question of like, where does the yield come from? Because one of the critiques that's made of Eigenlayer, and as you alluded to, it doesn't have slashing enabled to my knowledge, right? There's so much TVL held in Eigenlayer, and it's not clear that there's enough demand for Eigenlayer's security to actually pay out yield proportional to that. So like the yield would be so small that there's not really a reason to be an operator on Eigenlayer. To my understanding, is a little bit of the critique. And like if Eigenlayer and Ethereum has a much larger TVL than Solana does. So what's sort of the case for why there would actually be meaningful yield and like businesses paying for the security that something like Jito restaking would offer?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and it certainly matters, and we shouldn't like skirt around that question at all. So in general, the yield is going to have to come from somewhere. And this should just be people paying for the services that are being secured by the restaked security. And the question is like, is there enough, incentive there to meet the demand? And I generally think yes. I think we kind of overestimate how high the expectations actually are. Because I think personally, what you have to do is just have to get increase the staking like basis yield, by a few basis points, and you've got a superior product to liquid staking. So like, for Jito restaking, for example, when you restake there, you're already getting the native Solana issuance plus like the MEV enhanced yield from Jito's network. So you're not missing out there. And then what you really just need is a few more basis points, and you'll be pretty happy. And you can already take that and use it in DeFi through some sort of VRT or LRT, whatever it may be. I don't think people have like super high expectations. I don't, because like then we're kind of like assuming that everyone is like dumb. It's like, I don't think the expectations are really high there. And where a lot of these LRTs on Ethereum at least are being used is like people are just taking the LRTs, the most popular one being EtherFi's WEETH, and they're just throwing it on Aave. And so that now it's the third largest asset on Aave. There's around like $2 billion on there. Really high utilization rate. So people are just like looping over there. So generally people are just trying to like maximize their exposure to whatever asset they're bullish on. So I think we're going to see the exact same thing play out on Solana with like the VRTs there. Of like the main place these things end up are just lending markets for the most part. And there's still questions of like how the yield is actually going to be paid out. We could kind of get into that another day maybe, because right now it's looking pretty messy on the Ethereum side, because it's really expensive. First of all, that's like a big issue. If you're a small staker, if you're going to manually claim all your rewards, you might be like out of profit by that point, just due to transaction fees. And then like play that out to you're a massive LRT. Like, are you fronting the gas for your users? There's a lot of questions, and Eigenlayer did just put out an update to make this like cheaper because it was very gas intensive before due to like their design. But I mean, there's a lot of like open questions over there. But the reward and the payment method is ultimately where the yield is going to be coming from. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, so like, we can keep going on it if you want to, but
Go for it. Bonus content. Why not?
All right. So I think generally speaking, to make it like succinct, if Solana is going to have an advantage over Ethereum in terms of restaking, the place they should really focus on is the rewards itself. Because when I restake on Solana, I'm not going to want XYZ governance tokens of all the NCNs that are launched over there, or for Solare, I'm going to want more Sol or I'm going to want USDC. So I think like you should really just kind of narrow down the payments of these things to these two specific assets and just have those pay out immediately. Like once the service is completed, just have it pay out to the end users on a pro rata basis. There are downsides to this, like because it's essentially like I'm essentially saying like NTNs shouldn't have tokens, and there's a lot of arguments that you can make against that. But ultimately, it's just going to be like an uphill battle because like one, you're going to have people just constantly dumping your token to realize profit because the point you raised about operators have to make money. It's their job. They're not running these nodes for the sake of alignment or whatever it may be, or their altruism. So I mean that's an uphill battle, number one. Number two is like the way that we do tokens now, just like launch it with a relatively low float and have them kind of like emit over the next couple of years. You're just having supply dilution. Of course, like your token, if you use it properly, you can incentivize a bunch of usage, but like there's a big uphill battle there in terms of market forces, because like there's a lot of reasons to sell these tokens at launch, and we kind of see that with every single airdrop in the past year. I don't think any airdrop for any project that launched over like let's say like 20 million FTV is in the green, and if they are, please tell me which one it is.
I think Jupiter's token is up. I always check it. It just barely, but since launch, it's up a little bit. It has gone down in recent months though, from where it was.
I thought I checked it yesterday. I thought it was because I saw your tweet about it. Oh yeah, it is up. Yeah, I was looking at like the spike though. Yeah, you're right. Congrats, Jupiter. Way to go, guys.
Yeah, I don't know
That's huge.
How they're making the supply and demand work there, but I don't know.
They got a great business.
So when I hear that, so NCNs are Jito's version of AVSs on Eigenlayer. So and like the NCN probably wants to launch a token, like the people building it, because there's the team and the investors book returns that way. So this would basically take Jito creating a policy saying no, like NCNs can't launch a token. It all has to be Jito's native restaking token. That's sort of how this would work, right?
I think they should allow for optionality. Like I don't think I think it'd be like a mistake for Jito to come out and like put those rules in place. But I think if you're an NCN, there's probably an advantage because like at the end of the day, like you're a service business as an NCN, and all of your code is open source. And so services businesses themselves are like, you really have to differentiate on different things because services themselves are usually identical for most part. And then when you take that to, the crypto world and everything is open source, like what really is your moat other than the branding and like the relationships you have with these, your existing customers, whoever they might be. So I just think it's going to be hard to have a NCN token that does well or an AVS token that does well over time unless you've got a really, really good business and you've dug out a moat. And ultimately, I don't think that's what will happen. I think you're going to have a few AVSs and a few NCNs that are very, very profitable. And then like you're going to have like a tail of a bunch of other ones that are just like these niche microservices that are very, very useful for their end customers, but ultimately don't make a ton of money, and that's all right because like that's kind of what restaking is all about. Actually, it's just like creating a another subsector of the crypto economy, which really all happens on chain, and all like the B2B stuff is different stakeholders in the ecosystem. So it's going to be really interesting to see this like a couple years down the line when there actually is a lot of economic activity taking place, specifically within the crypto economy. Of like these protocol to protocol businesses, but for like the early days, I think it's going to be difficult to navigate.
Yeah, and the token stuff seems just always difficult. Like the low float high FTV is a real problem, and that's an interesting point I hadn't thought about. But these NCNs might lead to more token launches because crypto loves them.
Yeah, we love our tokens, and like it is good initially for like trading volumes, and that can be like maybe good for like Jito itself because they obviously benefit massively from tokens going through price discovery, as we kind of saw with like the pump.fund stuff and all the tips that were coming through. I don't know, like the meme tokens as well over the last cycle, but it's like how sustainable will these incentives be? But I mean, ultimately, if you put like some real thought into it and you build a great product, I think it's definitely possible. But again, it's just going to be difficult to navigate.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But for now, that's all the time we have for today's roundup. It's been a good time. There's been some interesting stories, and I'm sure there will be many more by the next time we do a roundup here on Lightspeed, just with all the breakpoint announcements that are going to be coming through the pipe. It'll be it'll be an exciting weekend, I'm sure. Thank you everyone who listens week in and week out. If you have feedback, comment under the YouTube, tweet at me. If there's things you want us to cover or projects we should be looking at, would love to hear that stuff. Love to hear your feedback if you're a listener. But for now, that's all we have. Ian, thank you so much for coming on the show, and hope to have you back sometime.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. This episode would not have been possible without the Sei network. Don't forget, user incentives are coming to Sei from teams like DragonSwap. Make sure to check out Sei today. You can start farming on Sei by visiting dragonswap.app.